our Brattleboro's Community Talk Show. We're glad to be back with you again. We have another guest from our community on, and today that's Abby Jacobson. She's a professional adoption consultant, and she has over 20 years of experience as a psychotherapist and a substance abuse counselor. And she comes from a family with 4 generations of adoptions. She's been both a foster child and an adoptee. As an adoption consultant, Abby is a guide, a counselor, and a companion for others on their journey of self-identification. And today, she's going to talk to us about her own journey. Welcome, Abby.
Hi, Wendy. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's great to have you on the show. You have quite a story, and we are very grateful to you for sharing it with us today, and also to let folks know about this wonderful thing that's available to people who are needing adoption consultation.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Abby, you were born in Brooklyn, and you had some very turbulent early years.
Yes.
You don't have much memory of those very, very early years?
None.
Yeah.
Not really, no.
Your parents were with you for the first year or so of your life.
Correct. And then they divorced.
Mm-hmm.
And my father just left the picture, and my mother was left at that time trying to raise a baby while she was also struggling with her own substance abuse issues and mental health problems. And so as I understand it, my maternal grandmother, my mother's mother, was sort of behind the scenes, and when my mother would need to go in for inpatient treatment, my grandmother would make sure I was placed in a home across the street from the hospital. So that when my mother came out, we could reunite. I have no memory of that.
So that was the first 3 or 4 years?
Exactly.
Did you see your grandparents during that time?
I did not.
But as you say, your grandmother was in the wings, so she was aware of what the situation was, and when, it sounds like when you needed help as well, she could step in.
Yes, and she had the financial resources to be able to do that. I don't know if I ever really appreciated that when I was younger, but it really helped me with my progression through life.
Yes,
so.
yeah. When you got to be a little bit older, you were in and out of different foster families. And do you have memories of that?
Not the ones prior to age 8. I know there was a lot of bouncing around, and yeah, for whatever reason, I just haven't been able to dig those up. And for now, it's fine. I'm okay with that.
It's probably just as well.
Yeah,
in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
Right? Yes.
Again, I'd been bouncing around from home to home, didn't know where my mother was, and then all of a sudden, I'm told at age 8 by my mother that I'm going to move in with this foster family. And it turned out that my mother had befriended this prospective foster mother when she was inpatient at Waterbury State Hospital. They were both patients there. Today, this never would have happened.
Yeah.
But they became friends. My mother agreed to have me live with her family, with this other woman's family. They had 5 biological kids of their own. I was one of the youngest. It was unbelievable. I mean, it was just like I was thrown into it, the mix.
Yeah.
And again, we didn't talk about anything. So I was just running on luck and keeping my head down.
Yeah.
I was also told by my foster parents at that point that we were going to present as a family unit to everybody. So I was to call them aunt and uncle, and that my foster siblings would be my cousins. And so to the outside world, that is how I presented myself. We all looked alike, which was the crazy part. They were Italian. I could, I fit right in, let's put it that way. But it was not a good situation.
No.
And during that time, my grandmother, again, who was in the wings, somehow knew that I was not having a good time, and she actually sent me to Green Mountain Camp for 4 years, for 4 summers, which was a real break, a respite from everything I had been experiencing. And when I was at the camp, I think I was there 6 weeks each year, which was the longest stretch of time, and I just dreaded having to leave.
Oh, and this is Green Mountain Camp for Girls.
In Demerston,
Yes.
Vermont.
Yep, Billy Slade.
Yes, she and Kathy were both there.
Yeah, oh, they
when
were
I was
there then.
Yes,
Really?
yeah, we were all there at the same time.
So many people have talked about it being such a lifesaver in many, many different ways, or just it was such a great place to be as a kid. So
Yes.
your grandmother lived part-time in Putney.
That's
so
correct.
That was the Vermont connection.
That's correct.
Yeah, and she knew about the camp.
Yes.
Uh-huh. And you were in school?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and none of my peers knew anything.
Right.
Teachers didn't know anything.
Yeah. Did it feel like you were keeping secrets, or just that you were invisible, or a little of everything?
I was going to say both. It was really important. I mean, for me, I wanted to be accepted. And if that meant keeping a secret, I would do it. I tried. I wasn't somebody who was going to seek out a best friend because I knew my life was so crazy that I'd probably just have to get up and move again, which continued throughout my life, actually.
Yeah.
And I had to figure out how to navigate it. And
Yeah.
I would say up until probably 10th grade, I was relatively shy. I didn't want people to notice me. I kept my head down, didn't do anything that was going to draw attention to myself. And then I realized I'm really tired of being in the shadows. I know I must have some qualities here. And it was at that point that I started getting into physical activities such as downhill skiing and cross-country skiing and horseback riding, and activities I'd never experienced before, and I loved them. I loved them. It was so helpful to me
Yeah.
to have been introduced to that.
The outdoors and animals, right?
Yes.
More than anything
Yes.
else. Yeah, for kids, that seems to be a place of real comfort, more comfort and healing too.
To this day, being outside is, you know, as much as it's safe, except for all the ticks in the summer.
There's that.
Yeah. But there's nothing more magical to me than, you know, being on a pair of snowshoes, going into the woods, and just the peace and the quiet and the serenity. And I think that's what I found more than anything, was the solace
Yeah.
in the woods. When I was 11 and I was in the foster home, I got word, and I don't remember how, that my mother had had a baby. And I was sort of like, oh, okay. I'd been an only child, so I was ecstatic. And one of the things I wanted more than anything was a sibling. And I was ready to turn heaven to earth to get to this child. Social services apparently had been involved at this point. I don't know why. I don't know how that happened, but they did arrange for me, because I was very clear, I need to see my brother. My mother is secondary, but I need to see my brother. And so I asked that I be able to do that. And so the social services allowed for me to have supervised visits with, I had a social worker at this point, to visit my mother and my brother for 1 hour, 1 month. And I would get there, and my brother was always sleeping, the shades were always closed, my mother would be in her nightgown or whatever, and I would just like automatically throw the shades up, and I'd get my brother to wake up, and I'd take him outside, and the state had been observing her, and they finally, 3 years later, so my brother was 3 at this point, I was 14, told my mother that she had a choice. She could either voluntarily give my brother up for adoption, or they'd come in and take him. She pulled the double header on that one, and she gave us both up for adoption that year.
Wow.
And yeah, and my brother was adopted out of the family, and my maternal grandmother stepped in and adopted me.
Got it. And then you reconnected with him, and he's been in your life ever since that.
Yes.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Another piece of family coming back in. Being a part of different kinds of families for, let's say, 18 years until you graduated high school. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Most of the years when I was in boarding school, and that was 7th through 12th grade, and because it was boarding school, it was much more pronounced because we'd have to go home for vacations.
Right.
And I didn't always have a home to go to because my grandmother had adopted me at 14. But even though she'd done that, she was in Putney, Vermont for 6 months a year and in Tahiti 6 months a year. 9 times out of 10, she was not in the country when I was on vacation. So it would be a quick scramble. Where am I going to go? I can't stay at the school.
Yeah.
And there were several friends who would invite me to their Thanksgiving or whatever. So I bounced around a lot, and the whole idea of family terrified me because I always felt like the outsider looking in. And that, I've really struggled with that issue in particular for most of my life, kind of knowing where my place was. And it wasn't until, and I'm jumping ahead in the story, it wasn't until I decided to create my own family that I was able to kind of reconstruct my interpretation of family. Kids and animals. I trusted those groups a lot more than I ever trusted the adults around me.
Right. Well, you also, you had no examples to follow.
None.
Yeah. At 14, your grandmother legally adopts you.
Yes.
Education was a very big deal for her. So she immediately, I'm assuming, enrolled you into private school?
Yes. And I assume she had her own advisory committee that I never knew about. So again, I switched schools every 2 years. I don't think I took education seriously until I was in 10th grade. I was at the Woodstock Country School at this, wait a minute. I was at the Mountain School in Virtue, Vermont at this point. And then I transitioned to Woodstock Country School, where my horse could go to school with me. And there was a switch there because all of a sudden I realized I'm not a freshman anymore. I got to start pulling it together here. I'm going to be a senior. I'm going to be expected, it is expected that I will know what I'm doing. So again, I could see that my grandmother in her own way was supportive of whatever journey I was taking, but education needed to be a part of that. And so I made the decision that the way that I could show her how much I loved her and was grateful to her was to do the best I could in school. And I decided after I went through high school that I was going to do college, and then I actually went on to graduate school. And what education provided me that I could find nowhere else was structure, boundaries, and even within that, you know, there's a lot of give and take.
Right.
But I needed those two pieces.
Yes.
And I remember when I was at Marlborough College, they were rigorously academic, and I was terrified. But I also, as you spoke about that will, I don't know where it came from, but I put my head down. I said, I'm going to do this because this is my ticket forward.
And your grandmother, of course, supported all of that as well. Yeah. So at 18, right before or maybe after you started college, both of your parents die.
While I was in college, first semester actually. Yes, I was at Goddard College at this point. It was, my first semester. I had a call from my grandfather who never called me. So I knew immediately something was up. And he told me that my mother had passed away. And this was news that I knew was coming. I had known for years and years, and I had to psychically be ready for that. I didn't know how, but I knew that she was going to die way before I did. And anyhow, so my grandfather asked me, he said, do you want to come home? I said, yes. Home being the critical word here. So I went back to my grandparents' home in Putney, and my grandmother collapsed. Physically, this was her only child who she'd been trying to keep alive for so long, and just couldn't. And So needless to say, she and I grieved very differently.
Yeah.
And she did at one point ask me if I needed to talk to somebody, and I said, oh yeah. And so she asked me who, and I had the name of somebody, a therapist, and before I knew it, she'd already scheduled an appointment for me, and that started a 10-year journey for me. And this particular therapist was with me when I got news again at Goddard College 4 months after my mother died that my father had passed away. And at this point, an uncle who I didn't even know had contacted my grandmother to say, we think it would be better if Abby didn't come to the service, because I didn't really know my father, so there's no point. But we would love to be here for her, and we would love to meet her. And so all of a sudden, the world is starting to open up to me. And I did meet this Uncle Jerry and Aunt Maura, and they've been in my life. Well, Aunt Maura passed away a while ago. Uncle Jerry turned 99 years old last week.
Wow, wow, amazing. Again, family.
Family.
After school, after you graduate, you get married.
I do.
And you had a couple kids.
I did.
Right.
Yes. Yeah, Family 101, here we go.
Yeah.
And that was a terrifying and magical moment all at the same time, because I knew I didn't want to make the same mistakes that my parents had made. To this day, I kind of question, like, why did they think they could be parents? But, you know, that thought doesn't do me any good. So
right.
I am extremely grateful that I experienced having a trustworthy, loving relationship in which my children were produced, conceived, and they have been the greatest love of my life, both of them.
Yeah.
And my brother's right in there with the mix of them.
That's wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And my boys have always known my brother, their uncle.
Yes.
It's been 33 years, we've decided.
And he's been in their life, their whole lives.
They've never not known him, which is amazing, because he and I had that gap of 15 years.
Much of your story has disappeared, or you don't remember parts of your story. You've had to, you've had tools, and I'm wondering about how you've created your own story, and how have you done it seemingly without bitterness? And you've gone through so many different, issues of abandonment, all of that stuff. How have you done it?
Well, I think this is a question I've thought about before, and there's two things that go on for me. One is that I've got this incredible drive in me.
Yeah.
And I don't know where that came from. I'm just grateful to have it. I'd love to say it's because I'm a Capricorn, I'm stubborn, and when there's a goal, I'm gonna go for it.
Yep.
I also think that the message that I gave myself from all my childhood experiences was, my path is about doing something different. I am not going to repeat the same mistakes my parents made. I refuse to do this. And the irony of all this is that at one point I was very clear I was never going to have kids. Because I was terrified of it. And so the fact that I had gotten to a point of trusting at least one other person, and I was willing to go on this journey of parenthood with, spoke volumes to me, and it showed me that I could do it. That was the other piece.
Yeah.
The bitterness, I never was angry about what happened. I was heartbroken. But again, there was nothing I could do to change the situation. And so instead of languishing on the what ifs, it was more about, how can I change the script? And I've attempted to carry that to this day.
And it sounds like you got there at a pretty young age.
I think I did.
Yeah. And you've moved forward, it sounds like, all along the way.
I hope so.
It sounds like you had some guardian angels as well.
I think so. Yeah, I call them my spiritual guidance center.
That's great. I like that. So you talk about helping people with self-identification. And I think that's a lot of what you're talking about here, you know, and calling, you know, we call it self-identification, but it is finding places and finding ways where we feel aligned or balanced or whole.
Yes. And the term I come up with is I am a work in progress. I'm not there yet. I am content where I am today, which is probably the first time ever. And because I've had this guardian angels along the way to help me get to this point and realize that I have a story to share, and it doesn't necessarily need to be shared, but what I want to be able to do is to have other people who might have similar stories and have been through the process of adoption to know that there's someone out there who understands their story, especially when it involves creating an identity for yourself. And having been adopted, that was, even though I was adopted under the best of circumstances, identity was continually an issue for me, trying to figure out when I'm family, when I wasn't family.
You did form ties, close ties with people that you stayed with and that continue to this day.
Yes.
Did it widen your concept of family?
Yes, it has. And again, as a result of my being able to create my own terms of a family, that allowed me to also reach out to other parents who were doing similarly. Having a husband, having kids, being part of a community where the focus was so much on raising those children as part of the community. That was a huge moment in my life where I was both kind of observing what worked for different families, as well as going by the seat of my pants and my gut. But I have realized that, yes, I have had probably more families than anybody can imagine because there have been those people who have really helped me step forward. And it may have been in a very subtle way, but nonetheless, it's helped me get to this point where I am today, and I could not have done that on my own.
Right. You now are an adoption consultant, and can you describe how you came to that, and maybe flesh out a little bit more about your business?
Sure. I want to say it was about 2 years ago that I started thinking about it, but when I really dig in, I think that this is an idea that had been brewing much longer. When I got into the field of psychotherapy, I wanted to work with kids. That was my first line of business. Somehow I got sidelined into the whole field of substance abuse. Okay, clearly I needed to, so I did. Then I was in that field for, I want to say 20 years. And then some medical issues came up, and I needed to start, well, I didn't need to, I did start to really look at how my emotional state was affecting my physical state. And it got to a point where I knew that my stress levels were not going down, and I needed to make some fundamental changes. And so I decided, and this is over the course of 2 or 3 years, to step out of the field. And I really felt like I was leaping off the proverbial cliff. One of my friends had suggested that, she said, I can suggest a life coach to you if you would be interested. And I was like, sure, because I have no idea what's coming next. So she gifted me 5 sessions with this life coach. And one of the first questions with the life coach was, so what do you want to do? And I didn't even blink. I said, I am ready to be an adoption consultant. And her response was, whoa. I said, yeah, I've given this a little bit of thought. And she said, okay, and let's go. So she really helped me create sort of the boundaries around it and get it to a point where I can have an elevator speech about it. My goal is to be neither, I'm not presenting as a therapist, so there's no diagnoses, there's no assessment. I am there to listen objectively, no judgment, and it's primarily, my focus is I want to be working with youth age 16 plus, and I start with that age because I really want to hone in and be available for those adoptees who are struggling with the issue of identity. And being an adopted person with those issues on top of being an adolescent is huge.
Right.
And I know for myself, when I most needed somebody in that role, there was nobody there. So if I can be that person to help someone else carve out their path towards even just developing a rough idea of what identity means to them, I'm happy to be that person. So,
and so you go from 16 up, so you are also dealing with adults.
yes.
So people perhaps much like yourself who have come to a different developmental stage in their lives and looking back and realizing, oh, what do I do? I mean, that's a wonderful thing. And this is not, there aren't many of you around.
There are not. And my research has shown me that most adoption consultants work for some type of a social service agency. There's not many who are independent. And I really did a lot of digging into LinkedIn, Facebook, just to kind of see what was out there. And Facebook, there wasn't a whole lot. When I first looked, LinkedIn has been a gold mine.
Oh, good.
And it's put me in touch with all kinds of adoptees who are doing comparable but different strategies. And I've been busy networking with a lot of these people and doing interviews with them. And just letting them know that here I am, I'm a resource. Tell me what you do so that I can be your resource. And I'm launching as we speak, which is just fantastic.
Oh, that's exciting. And we're going to have all the information at the end of the show, so you can visit Abby's website and check it out. I think it's really exciting that this is something we don't have in our community, readily available. I mean, certainly there are a lot of therapists. COVID, it's harder for people to get help. So to know that you're out there and ready, willing, and very able to help people is pretty wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I forgot to also say that this is a virtual platform, so people don't need to worry about going to an office.
Good.
From the comfort of their homes.
Yes. Well, we're all about the comfort of our own
we
homes.
Are. Gonna build on that
These
one.
days, yes, absolutely. And I assume once things are lifted, you probably will have an office of some kind in town to see how it goes.
Yes, exactly.
Abby, thank you so much.
Thank you, Wendy. It was a pleasure, and thank you for giving me the platform to do this.
You know, I just so appreciate, and I appreciate your courage and willingness to share your story.
Thank you.
And to help other people by doing so, and
thank you.
Strengthening our community by being who you are and offering what you have.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Thanks to all of you for being with us today. And as you know, we're a weekly show, and we're always happy to have you tune in, be in touch, be part of the community in whatever way you can. We'll see you next week.